My boyfriend, Zach, woke up from a car accident with temporary amnesia. The catch: he mistook my best friend Chloe for his fiance. To keep him from suffering any more brain trauma, the doctor suggested I play along. So I had to swap identities with my best friend. We agreed to only act apart. No intimacy, no real relationship. We were just supposed to wait until Zach got his memory back. And then everything would return to normal. But 6 months passed. Zach showed absolutely no signs of getting better. Until today, when I was mindlessly scrolling through Reddit and stumbled upon a trending advice post. I got into a car crash, lost my memory, and mistook my girlfriend's best friend for my actual girlfriend. Now that I have my memory back, I realized I've actually fallen in love with the best friend. How do I explain this to my original girlfriend? The top comment, which had thousands of upvotes, offered a piece of advice. Keep faking the amnesia. Obviously, it's the perfect chess move. If things go well, you get the best friend. If you regret it later, you can just pretend you just got your memory back. Poster had liked that comment, and the username of the poster belonged to Zach. I looked up just as Zach and Chloe walked through the front door. He was carrying several grocery bags, following closely behind Chloe. When he looked at her, the adoration in his eyes was so thick. It practically spilled onto the floor. As it turned out, Zach had stopped acting a long time ago. He had made the lie his reality. "Nora, you're home early," Chloe said. "Zach and I bought groceries. I was going to make chicken noodle soup. You love that." "Why?" Zach stood behind her. He gave me a distant nod and entered the kitchen. Ever since Zach lost his memory, I have been forced to live here as a guest, so I wouldn't be separated from him. I was the actual legal girlfriend. Yet inside the home, I prepared for a marriage. I had to behave like someone who needed permission to say I was his real girlfriend. Yet every day I had to swallow my jealousy and watch him pour his heart into loving another woman. It felt as if a dull knife slowly shredded my chest. Every time they held hands or hugged in front of me, I repeated the same promise in my head. Just wait until Zach gets his memory back. Everything will return to normal. I'd endured 6 months. Instead of his recovery, I discovered he'd fallen in love with Chloe. She followed my gaze toward the kitchen and whispered, "I'm sorry, Nora. I'm useless." He still hasn't remembered. I lowered my eyes and laughed bitterly. "She didn't know you can never wake someone pretending to sleep." "Don't worry," she continued, squeezing my arm. "I'm watching him for you. I won't let him cross any lines. I only came back to grab something. I said I have to go out again." Zach called her into the kitchen. Chloe immediately brightened. "By the time you return, dinner will be ready." I watched her press her garlic-minced fingers beneath Zach's nose. "Do my hands stink?" He kissed her fingers. "Not at all. You smell perfect." They laughed and teased each other, looking exactly like a married couple deeply in love. Everything before me was the life I dreamed about for years, except I wasn't the woman in it. Thinking I'd left, Zach asked, "Has Nora lived in our guest room for 6 months? Hasn't she found an apartment?" Chloe hesitated. "Rent is expensive and living so makes her commute easier." "Why bring this up?" Zach kept chopping vegetables, his voice firm and unwavering. "Tell her to move out. It's inconvenient having 3 people here. Every time I want intimacy with you, I worry about a roommate in the next room. I planned to make your favorite pizza, but when she arrived, you changed it to soup. You're acting like a guest in your own home." Chloe went silent for several seconds. Then she leaned over and kissed his cheek. The kiss felt like a poison needle. When this began, she'd sworn to keep her distance. At first, she avoided touching him whenever I was present. Somewhere along the way, she'd become comfortable playing my role. "Let's discuss it later," she said. "Finding a good apartment isn't easy." Zach was prepared. "A friend found 2 places last week. They're near here and close to her office." Chloe agreed to speak with me. My eyes burned, but I forced the tears back and looked around the condo. I designed and decorated piece by piece for our future marriage. After the accident, my status changed from owner to guest. Every one of my belongings have been packed and shoved into the tiny guest room. In 6 months, Chloe had replaced the photographs, rearranged the closets, and erased nearly every trace of my life there. In only 6 months, I've been erased from my own future. Now Zach wanted me to pack my bags and leave. I slipped out without speaking. The sound of their laughter followed me from the kitchen. I took a breath and slipped through the front door. I didn't return to work. Holding on to the absolute last shred of hope, I went to the hospital. What if the Reddit poster wasn't Zach? What if his feelings were only a mistake caused by brain trauma? Doctor found his file. Zach Miller. I called him 3 months ago for follow-up. He told me his memory had completely recovered. It was around Thanksgiving. I congratulated him on recovering in time for the holidays. I froze. On Thanksgiving, Chloe's parents flew into the city. Zach personally drove to the airport, carried their luggage, and played the perfect welcoming host. That exact same day, my parents arrived with heavy bags excited to see us. Zach stood in the lobby, looked directly at the two people who had treated him like a son, and claimed he didn't recognize them. He had building security escort them outside in the cold. I had to explain that he lost his memory. Mom comforted me. As long as he's alive, that's what matters, the doctor said. Recovery takes time, but Zach already remembered. He knew I was the woman who'd loved him for 4 years, stayed beside his hospital bed, and planned to marry him. He knew my parents had crossed the country because they were worried about him. Still, he welcomed Chloe's parents and threw mine onto the street. He had deliberately chosen humiliation for me and kindness for her. He was fully prepared to play the amnesia card for the rest of his life. Dr. Carter noticed my expression. Is something wrong? Is he having complications? I was checking whether the blood clot had dissolved. He smiled. Don't worry. His scan is completely clear. He's 100% recovered. It won't affect your wedding plans. And it certainly won't affect your love life. 6 months earlier, Zach lay in a coma for a week. I took a leave of absence and stayed beside him for 7 days, afraid even to close my eyes. I washed his face, massaged his stiff hands, spoke to him through the night, and begged him to wake up. The one time I went downstairs to pay the medical bills and asked Chloe to watch him for 10 minutes. He woke up when I returned. He was gripping Chloe's hand. No matter how much I explained, he insisted she was his girlfriend and stared at me as if I were a stranger, trying to destroy his happiness. Doctor warns that his injured brain couldn't withstand a sudden emotional shock. The 3 months he told me he'll recover. It won't ruin your wedding. Who could have imagined life would be this cruel? The wedding, Dr. Carter thought he was reassuring me about, would never happen. The elevator descended. My mind replayed everything Zach had done during the 3 months since his recovery. Now that I knew the truth, his acting seemed terrible. The pauses before he answered, the moments he almost called me by an old nickname, the way he remembered every password but supposedly forgot me. It had all been there. I have been too desperate to believe him, constantly using amnesia to justify his behavior, because I was lost in those thoughts. I followed the crowd and stepped off on the O-B-G-Y floor by mistake. I had already walked far from the elevator when I realized. Then I saw Zach. He should have been cooking with Chloe. Instead, he stood inside a consultation room with her. I stopped outside the consultation room. The door was slightly open, and the doctor's voice drifted through it. You're 8 weeks pregnant, the doctor said. Are you keeping the baby? Before Chloe answered, Zach explained yes. Zach held the ultrasound, as if it were the most precious thing he'd ever touched. He pulled Chloe into his arms and hugged her tightly. We're having a baby before you start showing. We'll go to City Hall and get married. We need a wedding. He was already planning aloud. I'll call my parents tomorrow. It's rushed and I'm sorry if it feels sudden, but I promise I'll give you everything. You won't miss out on a single thing. His back was to the door, but Chloe faced me. Her eyes locked directly onto mine, and the blood drained from her face. She shoved him away. Zach followed her gaze and turned. The moment he saw me, panic crossed his face. Nora, aren't you supposed to be at work? Why are you at the O-B-G-Y-N? I looked at Chloe. You're pregnant. She lowered her head. Chloe lowered her head guiltily, unable to meet my eyes. He immediately stepped protectively in front of her, placing his body between us. We're engaged. Things became passionate, and we didn't use protection. Pregnancy is perfectly normal. I laughed at myself, right? You two are the engaged couple now. On the drive home, Chloe sat beside me in the back seat, staring at her shoes without saying a word. Zach remained on high alert. He repeatedly checked the rearview mirror, watching my hands and expression, as though I might suddenly attack his precious Chloe. I looked at my phone and replied to my company's HR manager. I accept the transfer. I will join the Italy branch's lead engineer. The mid-minor year meeting. Headquarters had announced its European expansion and began selecting engineers to support the launch. Coincidentally, I was the only engineer in my branch who had minor in Italian in college. The promotion offered a larger team, better salary, and a future I'd once wanted. Previously, even when I believed Zach had amnesia, I couldn't bear the thought of leaving him or starting a long, minor distance relationship between my career and Zach. I had already chosen him once. From now on, I would choose myself. Back at the condo, I learned why they visited the hospital. Chloe had begun vomiting violently while cooking. Zach feared a serious stomach problem and rushed her to the emergency room. Now he worried. The smell of grease might trigger her morning sickness again. So he turned to me as if the request were obvious. Nora finished dinner. Chloe looked conflicted. But Nora doesn't know how to cook. Zach helped her own to the sofa. She can learn a pregnant woman can't do physical labor. The word pregnant pierced my ears. I entered the kitchen and washed the vegetables. Zach followed and locked the door. If anything happens to Chloe or the baby, I'll make your life a living hell. It felt as though someone had taken a rusty knife and carved a hole through my chest. Cold air seemed to howl through it. I didn't dare look up. Terrified, he would see the tears gathering in my eyes. You're overthinking. Chloe is my best friend. I'm happy she's pregnant. Why would I hurt her? His eyes lingered on my face. He was probably trying to decide whether I knew. His memory had returned. After several seconds, his tense shoulders relaxed. Since you're best friends, you should help care for her. Minutes later, Chloe called me from the kitchen claiming she wanted ice cream. Her eyes filled with tears. When did it start? I asked.
She sobbed.
It was one night we both drank too much,
She said.
I swear I took Plan B. The next morning, maybe it had expired. I don't know. I still became pregnant. She hadn't told me a word. I lived like a complete fool. I believed that was a tragic amnesia victim who'd chosen the wrong woman. And Chloe was my loyal best friend who would never betray me. Now I understood I was the only person still romanticizing the past. They had crossed the line long ago beneath my nose. Without warning, Chloe dropped to her knees and slapped herself hard across the face. I'm terrible. I betrayed you. I lost my mind and made a mistake. Just say the word, Nora. I'll go to the clinic and get an abortion tomorrow. There's no need. She froze, still clutching my skirt, and stared up in disbelief. I pulled my skirt from her grip. The baby is innocent. Her eyes widened. But what about you? What are you going to do, Nora? At that moment, Zick emerged from the kitchen, carrying a plate of food, and walked directly into the scene of Chloe kneeling at my feet. She scrambled up. I slipped. Nora was helping me. His temper ignited instantly. He grabbed Chloe's arm, pulled her behind him, and glared at me as if he caught me hurting her. Did you hear nothing I said? Chloe was kind enough to let you live in our home. And this is how you repay her. Chloe clung to him, crying. It's not Nora's fault. Zach lowered his voice. Zach forced himself to breathe evenly, then lowered his voice to a cold whisper. Fine, I won't argue about what happened, but you're moving out today. Chloe is pregnant. It isn't suitable for an outsider to live here anymore. Chloe's body went rigid. She slowly turned her head to study my reaction. Okay. Without a single second of hesitation, I entered the guest room and packed the belongings. They already compressed into that tiny space. As I dragged my suitcase toward the front door, Chloe hurried after me and held my hand, lowering her voice so Zach wouldn't hear. Don't worry, I'll persuade Zach to let you move back tonight. No need. I pulled away and left the building. Then I called my real estate agent. I want to sell my condo. Cash buyer preferred, as fast as possible. Zach had played the amnesia card for so long that he seemed to have forgotten something very important. My parents had bought the condo in full as my wedding gift. The agent on the phone paused for a moment, catching his breath at the sudden urgency in my voice. A cash buyer for a fully paid-off downtown luxury condo? Nora, in this market, if you list it 5% below fair value, I can have an investor sign the deed papers by tomorrow morning and close within 5 days. 10% below, I said, my voice steady, stripped of all emotion. Under one condition. The buyer must agree to take possession immediately upon closing. No grace period, no leaseback. And I want the locks rekeyed by the new owner the second the funds clear. Consider it done, the agent replied. I hung up, pulled my suitcase to the curb, and caught a cab to a quiet, upscale hotel near my office. Sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, I opened my laptop. My hands were perfectly still. The paralyzing shock that had choked me in the kitchen had burned away, leaving behind a cold, crystalline clarity. For 6 months, I had surrendered my dignity, my home, and my self-respect to protect a man's healing
Brain.
I had lived in a broom closet guest room, eating leftovers, watching the man who had promised to spend his life with me press his lips against my best friend's skin. I had tortured myself with guilt, wondering if I hadn't loved him enough, if fate was simply cruel. But fate hadn't done this. Zach had. I printed out 3 copies of Zach's Reddit post, along with the timestamped thread history showing his account activity over the past 4 months. Then I logged into my bank portal. The condo was paid for entirely by my parents as a premarital gift, registered exclusively under my name. The luxury SUV Zach drove to transport Chloe's parents from the airport, title in my name, auto loan paid automatically from my personal checking account. The black credit card Zach had been tapping for dinner dates, ultrasound visits, and organic groceries. A secondary card tied directly to my primary account. I clicked through the settings. Secondary card deactivated. Auto pay on vehicle loan cancelled. Utility accounts, water, power, high-speed internet scheduled for disconnection in 48 hours. He had called me an outsider in my own home. He had complained about having a roommate in the next room, interfering with his intimacy. I was about to grant him his exact wish. For the next 4 days, I stayed in the hotel, finalizing my transfer paperwork with corporate HR. My visa for Italy was fast-tracked due to the executive nature of the position. My departure flight to Milan was locked in for the following Tuesday. Meanwhile, Zach's world began to glitch. On Thursday evening, while I was sitting in a cafe near the office, my phone hung. It was Zach. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Nora. His voice carried an uncharacteristic sharp edge of irritation, masked thinly by his usual gentle, fogged brain act. Where are you? Chloe tried to buy some specialized prenatal vitamins and her pregnancy supplements at the pharmacy, but the card was declined. I tried using the card at the boutique grocery store, and that was declined too. Did you forget to pay the bill? I took a slow sip of my black coffee. The card isn't broken, Zach. I canceled it. There was a silence on the line, followed by a heavy exhale. What do you mean? You canceled it? Nora, Chloe is 8 weeks pregnant. She needs proper nutrition and rest. Why are you acting so spiteful? Just because I asked you to find your own place doesn't mean you have to take your frustration out on Chloe. I don't owe Chloe your groceries, Zach, I said softly. She's your best friend, he barked, his calm facade slipping further than it ever had in 6 months. Look, I know this situation is hard on you. I know. You're confused because you think we had a past before my accident. But right now, my reality is Chloe. You're being selfish. Where are you staying anyway? You left your key on the counter. I found a place, I said. Don't worry about me. Good. Then, be reasonable. Transfer some cash for the household expenses until I sort out my bank accounts. My doctor says stress isn't good for my recovery. Your doctor says your brain is 100% recovered, Zach, I said quietly. The silence on the line was instantaneous. It stretched for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 7 seconds. What are you talking about? His voice dropped an octave, the confused, soft-spoken amnesiac tone vanishing, replaced by something defensive and guarded. I talked to Dr. Carter on Tuesday, I said smoothly. He told me your Thanksgiving checkup went wonderfully. Blood clot dissolved completely. Clear. Scan. I could hear his breathing change through the phone, shallow, sharp, calculating. He must have confused my file with someone else, Zach stammered, scrambling to rebuild his fortress of lies. I still have gray spots in my memory, Nora. You know that. Sometimes I can't remember basic things. Right? I replied with a faint, dry smile. Keep resting, Zach. You'll need your energy. I hung up before he could respond and immediately blocked his number. By Friday afternoon, the real estate sale was finalized. The cash buyer, a corporate relocation agency that flipped high-end downtown properties, wired the full amount to my bank account. The deed transfer was registered digitally with the City Land Registry at 2 p.m. The title no longer belonged to Nora Vance. At 4 p.m., the agency's asset manager called me. Ms. Vance, the legal transfer is complete. Our property management team and local security team are heading to the condo now to inspect the premises and change the locks. Per our agreement, any unauthorized occupants will be asked to vacate immediately. Thank you, I said. I'll meet you there. I put on a tailored cream blazer, swept my hair up, and took a taxi back to the building I used to call home. When I arrived at the penthouse floor, the double doors to the condo were wide open. 2 uniformed security guards stood near the threshold, while a locksmith in blue overalls was already unscrewing the brass faceplate of the smart lock. Inside, chaotic screaming reverberated through the hallway. What do you mean we have to leave? This is my home, Zach's voice shrieked, laced with unbridled fury. I stepped into the foyer. The living room was in complete disarray. Chloe's mother and father, who had apparently flown back into town to celebrate the pregnancy. We're sitting on the suede couch, looking utterly bewildered and pale. Chloe was standing in the center of the room, holding her hands over her stomach, crying hysterically. Zach was standing nose to nose with a suit-clad property manager, clutching a stack of legal papers. "Sir, I've explained this to you 3 times," the property manager said calmly, holding up a certified land registry document. "This property was owned solely by Ms. Nora Vance. She sold the property to our firm today. The transaction is complete. The deed is recorded. You have no lease, no tenancy agreement, and no legal right to occupy these premises. She can't sell it. We live here," Zach roared, his face flushed red, veins bulging at his temples. "I'm her. She lives here with us. This is illegal." "It's entirely legal, Mr. Miller," I said, stepping past the security guards. Every eye in the room snapped to me. Chloe gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "Nora, what is happening?
Why?
Are these men changing the locks? Where are we supposed to go?" Zach spun around, his eyes blazing. He marched toward me, raising a finger. "Nora, have you lost your mind? You sold the apartment. Where the hell are Chloe and I supposed to sleep tonight? She is pregnant."
How could you be so?
Utterly heartless. Chloe's father stood up, looking angrily at me. "Nora, I thought you were Chloe's friend. You know Zach has brain damage. How can you throw a recovering trauma patient and a pregnant woman onto the street?" I didn't flinch. I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out a manila folder, tossing it casually onto the marble coffee table in the center of the
room.
"Zach doesn't have brain damage, Mr. Reed," I said, my voice echoing clearly through the high ceilings. "He hasn't had brain damage since November." Chloe froze. Zach's posture stiffened instantly, the blood draining from his face. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Chloe's mother spat, standing up to comfort her daughter. "He lost his memory in the crash. He mistook Chloe for his fiance because of his trauma." Page 1 of that folder, I pointed to the table, is an official signed medical affidavit from Chief of Neurology Dr. Carter at St. Jude Hospital.
It
confirms that on November 14th, 3 months ago, Zach Miller's cognitive functions returned completely. He was given a clean bill of health. Chloe's father blinked, looking down at the table, then looking up at Zach. "Zach, is this true?"
No.
"She's lying. She forged it." Zach yelled frantically, turning to Chloe's father. "Uncle Reed, you know me. I've been struggling. My memory is fogged." "Is it?" I smiled softly, pulling out my phone. "Then let's talk about Thanksgiving Day, Zach. The exact day Dr. Carter signed your clearance." I looked Chloe's parents dead in the eye. "On Thanksgiving, Zach drove my car to the airport to pick you two up. He brought you here, cooked you dinner, and called you mom and dad. But when my parents, the people who bought this condo, the people who paid for his hospital stay, arrived at the front gate, Zach walked down, looked them in the eye, pretended he didn't know who they were, and had building security kick them out into the freezing rain." Chloe's mother gasped, turning her head slowly to stare at Zach. "He didn't do it because of amnesia," I continued, my voice ice cold. "He did it because he knew if my parents came upstairs, they would remind him that he was living in my house, driving my car, and betraying their daughter." "Nora, stop it," Chloe sobbed, stepping forward, clutching Zach's arm.
Please.
Even if he made a mistake, he was confused. "We made a mistake.
We're
having a baby." "Oh, it gets better, Chloe," I said, opening the folder to page 3. I held up a high-resolution color printout of a Reddit post, complete with the username Zach_M_91, the original posting date, and the comment log. 2 weeks ago, Zach posted on Reddit. I read aloud, taking my time with every
word.
"I got into a car crash, lost my memory, and mistook my girlfriend's best friend for my actual girlfriend. Now that I have my memory back, I realized I've actually fallen in love with the best friend."
How do I explain this to my
original girlfriend? The room fell dead silent. Even the locksmith stopped his drill. "And do you want to know what the top comment was, Mr. and Mrs. Reed?" I asked, looking at Chloe's pale, trembling parents. The top comment, which Zach upvoted and saved, said, "Keep faking the amnesia. It's the perfect chess move.
If
things go well, you get the best friend. If you regret it later, you can just pretend you just got your memory back." Chloe dropped her hands from Zach's arm as if he had suddenly turned into white-hot metal. She looked at him, her lips trembling, her eyes wide with horrific realization. Zach, you wrote that?
No.
Chloe, listen to me. That's not my account. She set me up. Zach's voice rose to a desperate, shrill panic. He lunged toward me, reaching for the folder. But the two security guards instantly stepped between us, pinning his arms back. Touch her again, sir, and we call the police for violent assault, the head security guard warned sternly. Zach. Chloe stepped back, her voice barely a whisper. You told me you were confused. You told me your brain hurt every time you tried to. Remember, Nora? He wasn't confused, Chloe, I said, looking at her with genuine pity. He was calculating. He used my love and guilt to keep a free roof over his head, used your guilt to get into your bed, and used amnesia as an excuse to avoid taking responsibility like a real man. Zach stared at me, his chest heaving. Seeing that his entire web of lies had been torn to shreds, his face twisted into something ugly and mean. The gentle, vulnerable patient was gone. In his place stood the selfish coward he had been all along. So what? Zach spat, glaring at me with raw venom. So what if I remembered? Look at you, Nora. You're rigid, you're obsessed with your work, you're boring. Chloe loved me. She took care of me. The moment I woke up, I realized I wanted her, not you. You think you're so smart selling this place? You're just a bitter, abandoned woman. I am single, Zach. Not abandoned. I corrected him calmly. And as for this apartment, I turned to the property manager. How long do they have to clear their personal belongings? 10 minutes, Ms. Vance. The property manager replied cold-faced. After that, anything left behind will be dragged to the curb as abandoned property.
Nora.
You can't do this. Chloe's mother shrieked, suddenly panicking. Chloe is pregnant. We have luggage. Where are we supposed to go on a Friday night? There's a 2-star motel near the highway, I said indifferently. I believe they accept cash, since Zach's credit cards are all canceled. You bitch, Zach roared, struggling against the guard. I'm going to sue you.
I
lived here for years. I have squatter's rights. Squatter's rights require continuous, unpermitted residency, without owner consent, Mr. Miller, I replied, pulling out one final piece of paper. You were residing here under a temporary permission agreement as a medical patient, which was formally revoked when I sold the property. Furthermore, the vehicle you drove here today, it's registered to me. The tow truck is downstairs right now, hooking it up to be repossessed and sold. Zach's eyes looked ready to burst. My car. I corrected him firmly. Everything you enjoyed for the last 4 years, the condo, the luxury car, the fine dining, the executive lifestyle was
Mine.
You thought you were playing a perfect chess move by taking my best friend and keeping my home. You forgot that in chess, when you lose your queen, the game is over. I turned on my heel and began walking toward the door.
Nora. Wait. Please.
Chloe ran after me, grabbing the sleeve of my blazer, tears streaming down her face. Nora, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't. No, he remembered. I thought he was sick. I thought I was helping him. Please, don't hate me. I stopped and looked down at Chloe's hand on my arm. Slowly, gently, I peeled her fingers off my jacket. You knew he was my fiance, Chloe, I said, my voice quiet, cutting through her.
Sobi.
Even when you thought he had amnesia, you knew he belonged to me.
But you
let him into your bed anyway. You wore my robes, you cooked in my kitchen, and you sat in my living room enjoying the life I built, waiting for me to leave. You don't get to play the victim just because the villain you chose turned out to be a fraud. Chloe collapsed onto her knees in the foyer, sobbing quietly into her hands. Behind her, Chloe's father was screaming at Zach, grabbing him by his collar, demanding to know how he dared deceive their family and humiliate their
daughter.
Zach was shouting back, trying desperately to shift the blame, his voice cracking with embarrassment and helpless rage as the locksmith's power drill word, sealing the door shut forever. I didn't look back. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and watched the brass doors slide closed, cutting off their noise
completely.
4 days later, Milan's Malpensa airport was drenched in late afternoon sunshine. The air was crisp, carrying the subtle scent of espresso and fresh rain. I rolled my luggage through the sleek marble terminal, taking a deep breath of the fresh Italian air. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification from my bank. The full proceeds from the condo sale had cleared into my high-yield investment account. My corporate relocation package had already settled my new apartment in the heart of Brera, overlooking a cobblestone courtyard lined with jasmine flowers. I sat down at a small airport cafe, ordered a cappuccino, and turned on my phone's data. A text message from a mutual friend popped up containing a screenshot from a local city chat group. It was a photo of Zach and Chloe. They were standing outside a cramped, rundown rental complex on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by mismatched cardboard boxes. Zach looked haggard, his clothes unwashed, arguing intensely with a landlord. Chloe was sitting on a suitcase nearby, looking pale and exhausted, her head in her hands. The text beneath the photo read, "Did you hear?" Zach tried to claim he had amnesia again to get out of paying his back rent, but Chloe's dad found out he was lying the whole time and cut him off completely. Chloe's family forced him to sign a strict prenup, and they're living in a studio while he works too. Entry-level jobs to pay for the baby. I looked at the photo for 3 seconds. There was no anger left in my chest. No dull knife shredding my ribs.
No.
Jealousy. No longing. Just a quiet, peaceful emptiness. I deleted the screenshot, cleared the chat, and permanently blocked every remaining contact from that past life. The barista placed my coffee on the table with a warm, polite smile. Grattai il tuo soggiorno a Milano, signorina. Enjoy your stay in Milan, Mississippi. Grazie, I smiled back, taking a sip of the rich, warm coffee. I looked out the window at the blue Italian sky stretching infinitely into the horizon. For 6 months, I had been trapped in someone else's lie. Today, my real life finally began.